Hello everybody, it's your pal Gracious Ava here, and welcome back to a sort of chill speed paint, but also a sort of semi-tutorial-ish. It's mostly just like, tips and trips that I will be giving for creating backgrounds, since this video is focusing on a background that I made. Well, a background, it's an artwork, but it's featuring the house of one of my characters, Leo, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the drawing process, the context behind the image, and again some tips and stuff on how to make your own backgrounds and the things that I do when creating environments and stuff for my characters. So yeah, with that, let's get started. So the idea behind this drawing was basically I wanted to draw one of the houses that my characters live in, Leo. And the house that they live in is a cabin in a winter-like world where the world is basically just all snow, and there's this one lone cabin in the middle of it. However, I also ended up making it a bit of a background study. As you'll see while I'm drawing this, I actually shaded it in two different ways. I shaded it with two different light sources and two different times of day. So one way that I rendered it was it being nighttime and with the fireplace being the main source of light, and the other one it being morning or daytime with the little bit of light coming through the window being the main source of light and the fire already being down. So I decided to do this because I wanted to practice more about rendering in specific daylight situations and specific light source situations, and I thought this would be a good way to do it. It did make the drawing process a lot longer, but it was really fun, and even though the layers also got a bit messy in certain parts, it was still fun. But again, I'm actually not that good with organizing my layers, so that was sort of a given to happen, but oh well, that's totally fine. As you can see, Leo here is chilling on a couch, as they do. I would imagine this is where they would sleep. I don't know if they actually have a bed in this house. It's a pretty small house. And on the carpet, you probably saw me sketching in a little creature. This is a pet that they have. They actually get it later on in their story. I'm making a comic for Leo in their story. Unfortunately, they don't actually meet their pet until pretty much the end of the comic, so you won't see much of them in their story, but they'll show up in other stories, so you'll probably see more of this little creature, who is a sort of fox rabbit, or like a fox / rabbit sort of hybrid. Obviously a snow fox and a snow rabbit sort of hybrid. I think I drew them sort of well. Their ears are a bit odd, so I do apologize for that. I'm not the best at drawing animals, and I am trying to get better at drawing animals, but I had fun drawing that into the picture, and yeah, again, as you can see here, I'm lining the little fox rabbit creature who is curled up in a little ball sleeping near the fireplace, which I think is very cute. This is the house that Leo's in. I might do some other artworks featuring some of my other characters' houses, just because that would be really cool. I've already technically done that with some of my characters for my comics, Hike's Magical World and Mysteries of Justeria. If you've read the comics, you probably already have seen where they live, so I probably won't do artworks featuring those. But for some of my other artworks or other comics that I haven't made yet, or some of my other characters that I don't plan on making a comic for anytime soon, that would be, I think, a fun practice to sort of play around with. As you probably also saw while I was doing the line art, I didn't make it super clean. So this was something that I wanted to do with this picture. At first I wanted it to be very painterly and maybe not even do the line art after doing the sketch, but I decided to do the line art with my normal line art brush, but not have it be super clean. And some artists out there might be like, what? How could you not make it clean? That's what you're supposed to be doing with line art. And you might be appalled by me doing these sort of chicken scratch things and not using rulers or anything. But the thing is that it's doing primarily just clean line art. It's a little boring. Not to say that anyone who just does clean line art has boring art or anything, but it's just that it's one of those things that artists, some more experienced artists, will say to beginner artists all the time, and that is to never have messy line art, or like try to practice not having messy line art. And it is good to know how to do clean line art. I usually do clean line art all the time. Actually, I sort of lined Leo and the snow rabbit very cleanly compared to the background. But messy line art can have its advantages as well, and there's a lot of like cool artworks and art styles that primarily have messier line art, but it really works with those styles because it makes it feel very like messy and loose, and gives it a bit of a more hand-drawn feel. And that's what I was going for with this background as well. I did use rulers for the sketching as well, so just to make sure that the perspective was all good. And I not like an expert at perspective or anything, so I'm sure the perspective is probably not 100% accurate, but I tried. Yeah, I wanted the line art to be messier, just to give a sort of hand-drawn feeling, and also, even though I'm lining it with a hard brush, still give it a sense of painterly, like a painterly feeling to it and everything. And yeah, of course, it did make coloring a little bit harder for specific areas because I didn't close the gaps in all the way, but that's all right because it was worth it in the end. But yeah, filling in the base colors for Leo here. While this is playing out still, I wanted to talk about some tips for drawing backgrounds and drawing environments and stuff for your characters. So drawing backgrounds is a bit of a challenging topic because there is so much that goes into them, so much that goes into environments and stuff. So I'll probably make like a better full in-depth video about that one day, especially when I have a bit more knowledge on the subject. But for now, here's a couple of things I would like to say. First off, of course, when you're drawing interior stuff, it's always good to have a sense of perspective. There's 2-point perspective, 3-point perspective, all the perspectives, and there's also different views and angles. So for this drawing, I'm sort of drawing it in a more of a bird's eye perspective. Bird's eye perspective is basically where you imagine the camera is higher up from the subject and looking down on it. And then there's worm's eye perspective, which is pretty much vice versa, where imagine the camera is sort of lower than your subject and looking up at them. And for this one, obviously I went with bird's eye perspective, which made the perspective thing actually not quite as hard. I actually do much better with bird's eye perspective whenever I'm thinking of a more complicated perspective to draw in. I usually go with bird's eye just because that is easier for me. I do struggle with worm's eye a bit more, so I need to practice on that. But also, this drawing is also drawn in a 2-point perspective, and I believe that's the title of it. 2-point is actually, I don't know if it's 2-point perspective. It might be 1 point. But this perspective that I'm drawing this interior room in is one of the easiest perspectives to draw an interior room in, because most rooms are rectangular and have different corners of the room. So by drawing the room starting at one corner of it and spreading out, it can be a bit easier. And then there's the other perspectives as well that are a bit more challenging, especially for beginners. But yeah, I would recommend looking more into perspectives and how to sort of get better at those. But another thing that I really wanted to talk about was how to make environments and stuff specific for your characters. Now, as you can see here, In one of the corners of the room here, I added a couple of objects. These objects are specific to my character Leo. They have a sword, a couple of these triangular necklaces that they're actually wearing already, some pieces of paper, a bracelet, and a clock. Now these things are very specific to them and their character. The pieces of paper, I believe, would be like talismans. They're an exorcist, technically, quote unquote. They're not actually like an exorcist. They're like a monster hunter, but it's a bit complicated. But they have these talismans and different items that they use in order to fight these monsters. And that's one thing that you can do to create backgrounds, is to create or add in objects and things that are very specific to their character or to your character, and things that are very specific to their story. If you don't have like a super clear idea of what your character would have, or like what items they would have in their room, that's totally fine as well. You can sort of experiment with that, see what would work best for them, and just like, play around with it. Now, real quick, back to the actual drawing process of this. As you can see, I'm actually adding an overlay gradient layer onto this. This was in order to create a very unified color palette. This is something that you can do whenever you're creating artworks in general, really, is to create an overlay layer, sometimes maybe a gradient layer that is able to unify all of the colors together. And while I was drawing this, I had to do that because I realized the colors weren't really blending well together, so I had to make some gradients. One was a more warm tone gradient, obviously, so that way for the fireplace one, and one was a cooler one, which was for the daytime one. And the way I created the gradients was I had the lightest color be from the fireplace and the darker colors be around the edges, so that way the fireplace was obviously the light source and everything else was in shadow, and then vice versa again for the daytime one, where the lightest color was coming from the window and the darker ones were around the edges away from the light source. And like I said, overlay layers can be really helpful for pictures like this, where you need the colors to be much more unified with everything. And as you can probably tell, I'm struggling a bit with my layers, because like I said, I am very much not good at organizing my layers, but that's okay. And yeah, back to the tips and tricks portions of this. The environment of a character, or the background or room or house of a character, will all depend on that character themselves. Now this environment is a bit bare bones. Like I said, there's the objects that there are in the corner, there's the fireplace, there's the little fox rabbit on the carpet, but other than that there isn't much, and that's because Leo isn't a person that has much. They don't have that much on them, and so they don't have that much in their house. But to contrast that, if you have a character that has like a lot of stuff or is a bit more materialistic, they would probably have a lot of personal things and items that belong to them and that you can strewn around all over the place. If you have a character that's known for being much more messier and sloppier, maybe you can have like clothes or blankets strewn around the room, or you can have like dishes in the sink or something like that. Or if you have a character that's known for being much more neater and tidier, you can have like everything be like pristine and nice, and you can have like everything like organized. Again, it's very much dependent on the type of character, who that environment belongs to. And this is all for like interiors and like rooms and houses and stuff. It's very different for things like landscapes. Landscapes, I feel like, are a much more different topic than just rooms and interiors, which I would like to also talk about one day, because I do very much enjoy drawing landscapes a lot, which was funny. I used to not really like drawing backgrounds at all, like landscapes or interiors at all. Like back in my early stages of drawing, I would only focus on drawing the character, and I wouldn't really focus on the background or anything, which I don't well, it depends on what you like drawing, but it is good to at least have some sense of how to draw some backgrounds, in case you ever need to. Like for me, example, I had to get into drawing backgrounds because I draw comics, and Mysteries of Dysteria takes place in a city, Ike's magical world. It's a very fantasy world, so a lot of it takes place in these landscape environments. So I had to get into those, and luckily I actually did start liking drawing backgrounds back in 2022, so just last year actually, when I started my rainbow landscape series. I have I think some of the process of that on my channel, you can go watch, but yeah, that was when I really started getting into landscapes and backgrounds and enjoyed the process much more. So yeah, if you have something like that you're not super into, maybe try doing like a little experimentation with it, like different artworks or different like an art series, where once you start you can slowly learn more as you go, and you will hopefully eventually get better at it as you work on this project, and maybe even start liking it a bit more. I should probably do the same thing with hands, honestly, but I don't want to. I know it's a bit hypocritical, but hands really suck. Yeah, so as you can see here, I'm sort of doing the base shading for everything, the base shading. So for the cabin, I added these textures on the walls to sort of make it look more like wood, and I didn't change these much between the two different shading styles. I just mostly kept it the same, just changed the color of the shadows. And I'm doing the same thing for the couch and the carpet. And for Leo and their pets, they will have also two different lighting sources hitting them, so I shaded them in two different ways. But after I did the base shading for everything, I started working on the actual shading. I started working on the lighting or the shading for the specific lighting sources. And for the fireplace lighting, I went with two colors, and this is how I usually shade things. I usually stick to two colors for everything, which one color is obviously for the highlights and one is for the shadows. And for the fireplace one, I went with a very warm color for both the highlights and the shadows, and for the daylight one, I went with a very dark color for the or cool color I should say, for the highlights and shadows. And I'll talk about a bit more about the difference between warm colors and cool colors in an upcoming video of mine, where I talk much more in depth about my overall illustration process. I think I talked about that in last week's video, where I was going to make a video about that. It's coming, it'll be here soon, don't worry. I have one more video that's going to come out the week before that, but then I will have that illustration process out then. But yeah, and as you can see, I'm shading everything very painterly. The brushes that I usually stick with are the watercolor brushes and this one blender that I found online. It's called the Soft Serve blender. It was actually made by the YouTuber Lavender Town, and I absolutely love this blender. It's so nice, it's so good, and I'll link it below if you want to download it. It is very nice, and it's so nice. I love it. But yeah, I would recommend to check that blender out if you want very like nice painterly blendy feel to your shading stuff and illustration stuff. I don't know how to talk. Can you tell I don't know how to talk? I apologize for that. And now, finally, let's look at the final artworks for this video. And with that, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video and illustration process. Again, I apologize for the voiceover being very rambly and a bit incoherent, I'll be honest. But I hope that some of the tips I provided were at least a little bit helpful, if nothing else. And yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. This artwork, as well as everything else, will be in the description links below, including my 3 comics: Lost Hearts, Mystery Surface Area, and Haiku's Magical World. You all know the drill by now. And yeah, like I said, I'll have a video by next week. That one will be fully scripted, I promise. If you're tired of my incoherent ramblings, do not worry. Next week's video will not be this way, or the video after that. I can't guarantee for the video after those 2. We will see. But yeah, in the meantime, I will see you guys next week. Bye!